It was a rainy Tuesday morning when the Johnson family gathered to mourn the tragic death of 16-year-old Marcus. Friends, relatives, and classmates filled the small cemetery, offering their condolences and sharing memories of a bright young life taken far too soon. The air was thick with grief, heavy with the scent of flowers, and punctuated by soft cries and whispered prayers. Among them stood Olivia Johnson, Marcus's mother, trying to stay strong for everyone around her. She held a single red rose tightly in her hands, her eyes red from crying. Her heart was shattered, yet she remained composed, determined to honor her son's memory with dignity. Suddenly, the somber silence was broken. Detective Harrison, a police officer known for his aggressive and often controversial tactics, appeared at the edge of the gathering. Witnesses later said he seemed tense and confrontational from the start. He marched toward the family, demanding identification and questioning anyone who came near the funeral. Olivia stepped forward calmly, explaining that she was simply here to mourn her son, not to answer arbitrary questions. But Harrison ignored her explanation, raising his voice and insisting she comply. When she refused to leave or provide unnecessary information, his demeanor escalated. Before anyone could intervene, Harrison grabbed Olivia and handcuffed her in front of the mourners. Shock rippled through the crowd. Friends and family gasped in disbelief. "She's just burying her son," one mourner shouted, trying to get the officer to stop. Cameras from bystanders captured every second: Olivia's struggles, the officer's refusal to listen, and the stunned expressions of those around her. What the world didn't yet know was that Olivia Johnson wasn't just any grieving mother. She was a Supreme Court justice, a woman who had spent her career fighting for justice and equality. Yet, on this heartbreaking morning, even her position could not protect her from blatant and humiliating racial discrimination. Within minutes, videos of the incident were uploaded online. Social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags calling for justice began trending across platforms. News outlets picked up the story, labeling it a shocking example of systemic racism and abuse of authority. The image of a grieving mother in handcuffs touched hearts nationwide. While Olivia remained composed despite her humiliation, the public's fury only grew. The incident sparked conversations, debates, and calls for accountability across the country. It became clear that this wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a moment that exposed the ongoing struggles against injustice that many face daily. If this story shocked you, don't stay silent. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to follow Olivia's fight for justice and see how this heartbreaking moment turns into an unforgettable victory. Within hours of the heartbreaking incident at Marcus Johnson's funeral, the world had seen the shocking video. Olivia Johnson, a Supreme Court justice, had been handcuffed and publicly humiliated by Detective Harrison, a cop with a long history of complaints for racial bias. Social media exploded with outrage as millions watched the footage and demanded accountability. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Headlines screamed in disbelief: "Supreme Court justice arrested at her son's funeral?" and "Grieving mother handcuffed in broad daylight." People from all corners of the country shared the videos, commenting on the blatant injustice and calling for immediate action against the officer. Protests began forming outside the local police station. Citizens carried signs reading "Justice for Olivia" and "No one is above harassment." The collective anger was palpable. People demanded that Harrison be suspended and that the police department address the systemic racism that allowed such an incident to occur. Meanwhile, legal experts analyzed the situation. The case seemed open and shut: an officer misusing his authority, violating civil rights, and humiliating a grieving mother. civil rights organizations quickly rallied to Olivia's side, offering legal support and calling for federal oversight. Olivia herself remained composed in the public eye. In interviews with reporters, she emphasized the importance of accountability over revenge. "This isn't about me," she said, softly but firmly. "It's about every parent, every citizen who could face abuse because of the color of their skin. We must hold those in power responsible." Her calm, resolute stance only amplified public support. Social media influencers, politicians, and activists began sharing her story, turning it into a nationwide symbol of resilience and justice. Hashtags like Justice for Olivia, End Police Racism, and Grieving Mother Not Criminal went viral within hours. As the story gained momentum, the officer and the department faced intense scrutiny. Harrison's previous complaints were brought to light, and the department's attempts to justify his actions were met with widespread skepticism and criticism. Legal analysts predicted that this case could set a powerful precedent for civil rights accountability. Even the Supreme Court community weighed in. Colleagues of Olivia expressed outrage at the humiliation she endured, pledging their support and emphasizing that no one, regardless of rank, should ever be subjected to such treatment. The nation was watching, waiting to see how Olivia would respond. While the world mourned Marcus with her, they also admired her strength. Her fight had become larger than a personal tragedy. It was a rallying cry for justice, equality, and dignity. The story is just getting started. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to follow Olivia's fight as she turns heartbreak into a nationwide battle for justice. After the harrowing events at her son's funeral, Olivia Johnson wasted no time. She filed a lawsuit against Detective Harrison and the police department, determined to hold them accountable for their blatant abuse of power. The nation watched as the grieving mother-turned-justice fighter prepared for a legal battle that promised to make history. Her legal team, composed of some of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the country, meticulously gathered evidence. Bystander videos, eyewitness testimonies, and Harrison's prior record of racial misconduct painted a damning picture. Every detail, from the moment he arrived at the cemetery to the handcuffing of Olivia, was documented and analyzed. Meanwhile, Harrison's defense attempted to downplay the incident. His lawyer claimed he was simply following protocol and suggested Olivia had somehow overreacted. But the mounting evidence and public outrage made their argument almost impossible to defend. Legal analysts across the country called the case a clear example of police misconduct and racial discrimination. The media coverage intensified. Every day, news outlets aired clips from the funeral, highlighting the stark contrast between a grieving mother and an aggressive officer. Social media buzzed with support for Olivia as people shared the story, expressing anger and disbelief. The hashtags Justice for Olivia and End Police Racism continued to trend, making it clear that this was no ordinary legal case. It was a nationwide movement. The first pre-trial hearings were emotional. Olivia's attorneys presented eyewitness statements from mourners who had witnessed her humiliation. Teachers, neighbors, and friends recounted Marcus's life, his achievements, and the devastation caused by his untimely death. These testimonies humanized the case, turning it into a deeply personal story that resonated with millions. Olivia herself maintained an incredible composure throughout. Known for her intellect and poise as a Supreme Court justice, she approached the case with precision. She refused to be baited by Harrison's defense or the media frenzy, focusing solely on seeking justice for her son and herself. Her resolve inspired many, demonstrating that even in the face of immense grief and injustice, one could remain steadfast. The legal battle was set to unfold in a courtroom that would soon be under intense national scrutiny. lawyers on both sides prepared for a high-stakes confrontation, knowing that the outcome could influence public trust in law enforcement nationwide. As the world waited, one thing was clear. Olivia Johnson was not just fighting for herself, she was standing up against a system that allowed abuse and discrimination to go unchecked. Every filing, every hearing, and every testimony brought her closer to the justice she and her son deserved. The courtroom showdown is about to begin. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to witness Olivia's fight for justice and the shocking twists ahead. The day of the courtroom hearings finally arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Reporters, activists, and curious onlookers filled every corner of the courthouse. Cameras streamed live, broadcasting the proceedings to millions across the nation. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a case about a single officer, it was about justice, accountability, and the dignity of every citizen. Olivia Johnson, despite the grief still heavy on her heart, entered the courtroom with unwavering composure. Her presence commanded respect, not just because she was a Supreme Court justice, but because she embodied resilience. Every step she took, every glance she cast, reflected a woman determined to hold power accountable. The trial began with the prosecution presenting their evidence. Videos captured by bystanders at the funeral showed the officer's aggressive approach, his refusal to listen, and the moment he handcuffed Olivia in front of mourners. Witnesses testified to the trauma they observed, describing the shock and anger that rippled through the crowd. Teachers and neighbors spoke of Marcus, painting a picture of a bright young life tragically cut short. Their voices trembled at times, but their words were clear. Olivia's arrest was unnecessary, humiliating, and a blatant abuse of authority. Harrison's defense tried to argue that he was following protocol, portraying Olivia as an overreacting individual, but the evidence was overwhelming. Every witness statement, video clip, and prior complaint against Harrison stacked up, making it impossible for the jury or the public to ignore the truth. Throughout the proceedings, Olivia testified herself. She recounted the day's events with a calm, measured voice, detailing the humiliation she endured and the pain of being handcuffed at her son's funeral. She spoke not from anger, but from a desire for justice, for herself, for Marcus, and for every person who might face discrimination. Her words were powerful, resonating deeply with everyone in the courtroom and viewers at home. Social media buzzed as clips of her testimony went viral. People across the country praised her courage and poise, calling her a symbol of strength in the face of injustice. Influencers, civil rights activists, and even politicians voiced their support, amplifying the message that no one should ever be subjected to such abuse. As the day drew to a close, it became clear that this case was more than just a legal battle. It was a turning point. Olivia Johnson was not only fighting for accountability, she was shining a light on systemic issues within law enforcement, inspiring millions to demand change. The tension is building, and the courtroom drama is far from over. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to follow every shocking moment as Olivia fights for justice and truth. As Olivia Johnson's courtroom battle progressed, the story became impossible to ignore. National media outlets covered every detail, turning what started as a tragic personal event into a symbol of systemic injustice. The video of her handcuffing at her son's funeral had gone viral, and public outrage was reaching a fever pitch. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse daily, holding signs that read, "Justice for Olivia" and "End police abuse now." Inside the courtroom, tension was palpable. Olivia's legal team was relentless, presenting a mountain of evidence that left little room for doubt. Witness after witness testified, describing the shocking scene at the funeral, the grief, the humiliation, and the sheer disrespect Olivia endured. Every statement highlighted the disparity between the officer's authority and the unnecessary cruelty of his actions. Detective Harrison's defense tried desperately to shift the narrative. They argued he was simply performing his duty, attempting to justify his actions as routine police procedure. But the footage, coupled with decades of complaints against him, painted a starkly different picture. Analysts commented on national news that this was not just an isolated incident, but a clear example of systemic abuse of power. Meanwhile, Olivia's poise continued to impress the nation. Despite the emotional weight of testifying about her son's funeral, she remained composed, presenting facts with clarity and integrity. Every word she spoke resonated with viewers across the country, emphasizing that the fight wasn't only for her, it was for everyone who had ever suffered injustice at the hands of those meant to protect them. Public support for Olivia skyrocketed. Social media campaigns gained momentum, with millions sharing videos, news articles, and personal messages of solidarity. Influencers and activists amplified her story, pressuring law enforcement agencies to act. People began demanding Harrison's immediate suspension and a thorough review of the department's practices. The pressure wasn't just external. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution's arguments were gaining traction. Expert witnesses described the psychological trauma of public humiliation, particularly for grieving parents, and emphasized the lasting effects such incidents can have on mental health and community trust. Legal commentators highlighted how Olivia's case could set a precedent for accountability in police misconduct cases nationwide. As the day's session concluded, the courtroom emptied, but the story continued to dominate headlines. Citizens, lawmakers, and journalists all agreed this was more than a case about one officer or one mother. It was a turning point in the fight for justice, equality, and systemic reform. Olivia left the courthouse with her head held high. Though grief still weighed heavily on her, she had found a renewed purpose. She wasn't just seeking justice for herself, she was challenging an entire system that allowed such abuses to happen in the first place. The legal battle is heating up and shocking revelations are coming. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to follow Olivia's fight for justice and the unbelievable outcome ahead. The tension in the courtroom had reached its peak. Olivia Johnson, a mother still grieving the loss of her son, now stood at the center of a legal battle that had captured the attention of the entire nation. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and every word spoken in that courtroom seemed to echo far beyond its walls. Olivia's legal team laid out their strongest arguments yet. They presented eyewitness accounts, body cam footage, and a detailed record of Detective Harrison's prior misconduct. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture. A grieving mother humiliated in public, a police officer abusing his authority, and a system that allowed such injustice to occur. Harrison's defense attempted to discredit the witnesses, suggesting they might be biased or exaggerating the events. But Olivia's testimony was unshakable. She recounted the morning of her son's funeral with calm precision, describing the shock, the pain, and the disbelief she felt when Harrison handcuffed her in front of family, friends, and strangers alike. Her words carried a weight that no lawyer could refute. This was a real, raw moment of injustice. Legal experts in the courtroom commented on her strategy. Olivia wasn't just presenting facts, she was telling a story that everyone could feel. Her approach humanized the case, making it impossible for anyone to ignore the emotional and psychological damage caused by Harrison's actions. Social media erupted as clips of her testimony went viral. Millions of viewers shared their support, expressing outrage and admiration for her strength. Meanwhile, Harrison began to show cracks under the pressure. His attempts to justify his actions as routine procedure fell flat against the overwhelming evidence and public scrutiny. His prior complaints, which had previously been dismissed, were now scrutinized in detail, further weakening his defense. The courtroom drama intensified as expert witnesses testified about the systemic issues in law enforcement that allowed such incidents to happen. They explained how racial bias, unchecked power, and lack of accountability contribute to public distrust. Olivia's case had become more than a fight for her own justice. It had become a symbol of the nationwide call for police reform. By the end of the day, it was clear that the public and the jury were watching every detail. Olivia's calm determination, combined with the strength of her evidence, had shifted the momentum. The narrative was no longer about one officer's actions. It was about holding a system accountable and demanding justice for every citizen who might face similar humiliation and discrimination. The tension is almost unbearable, and the verdict could change everything. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to see how Olivia turns heartbreak into a historic victory. After weeks of intense testimony, emotional recounts, and mounting public pressure, the day of the verdict finally arrived. The courtroom was filled to capacity, buzzing with anticipation. Reporters, activists, and concerned citizens waited anxiously outside, while millions more watched the livestream, holding their breath as justice hung in the balance. Olivia Johnson, still grieving but unbowed, sat calmly at the plaintiff's table. Her legal team whispered final reminders, but she remained focused, her mind on the fight for justice rather than the spotlight. Detective Harrison, on the other hand, appeared increasingly tense. His defense team knew the mountain of evidence against him made their task nearly impossible. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. The jury filed in, and the forepersons stood to deliver the decision. Every eye was on them as they spoke. In the case of Olivia Johnson versus Detective Harrison and the City Police Department, we find the defendant liable for misconduct, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights. Gasps filled the room. Olivia's supporters erupted in applause outside the courtroom, while tears welled in her eyes. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. The jury went further, awarding Olivia $18 million in damages, a monumental sum that sent shockwaves through law enforcement circles and legal communities alike. Legal experts described the verdict as historic. The case had set a precedent for holding officers accountable for misconduct, even against those in positions of power. Harrison's career was in ruins, and the city faced an urgent call to reform its policies to prevent such humiliating and unlawful actions from happening again. Olivia addressed the press outside the courthouse, her voice steady and filled with quiet strength. "This victory is not just for me," she said. "It's for every parent, every citizen, every person who has ever been humiliated or oppressed by those in power. Today, we've shown that justice can prevail, even in the face of incredible grief and adversity." Social media erupted. Millions shared the news, celebrating Olivia's courage and the jury's decision. Hashtags like "Justice Served," "Olivia Wins," and "Accountability Matters" dominated trending lists worldwide. Her story had become more than a news headline. It was a symbol of resilience, hope, and the relentless pursuit of justice. While the $18 million verdict could never bring Marcus back, it represented a victory for truth and dignity. Olivia had transformed unimaginable grief into a powerful call for accountability and reform. Her fight had sparked a nationwide conversation about systemic injustice and the importance of standing up, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Olivia turned tragedy into triumph. Don't miss the final part of her incredible story. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to see how her courage continues to inspire millions. With the historic $18 million verdict behind her, Olivia Johnson stepped out of the courthouse to a sea of supporters and media flashes. The city had witnessed a Supreme Court justice, a grieving mother, turn heartbreak into triumph, and the impact of her fight resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. For Olivia, the victory was bittersweet. No amount of money or legal justice could bring back her beloved son, Marcus. Yet she found solace in knowing that her perseverance had not only held Detective Harrison accountable, but had also sent a powerful message. No one, regardless of their status, should ever be subjected to abuse or humiliation. The case sparked a wave of reforms across the police department. Policies were reviewed, officers underwent new training on accountability and bias, and oversight measures were strengthened. Olivia's courage had ignited systemic change, proving that one person's determination could challenge even deeply entrenched systems. In interviews, Olivia spoke passionately about the lessons learned from her journey. "Grief can either break us or fuel us," she said. "I chose to fight, not for revenge, but to ensure that justice, dignity, and humanity are upheld. Marcus deserved better, and so does every child and parent in our society." Her words inspired millions worldwide, and social media buzzed with admiration for her resilience. Olivia also took time to mentor young legal professionals and activists, sharing her story to empower them to fight against injustice. Her courtroom battle became a case study in law schools, teaching future lawyers the importance of courage, integrity, and strategic advocacy. Despite the national spotlight, Olivia remained humble, often visiting Marcus's grave to honor his memory. Friends and family described her as a woman transformed, not by tragedy, but by the choice to turn sorrow into action. Her story became a beacon of hope for those facing discrimination, a reminder that standing up for what is right can create ripple effects that change society. The public continued to celebrate Olivia's bravery. Documentaries, podcasts, and social media campaigns highlighted her journey, framing it as a modern tale of justice prevailing against all odds. From a grieving mother at her son's funeral to a symbol of accountability and systemic change, Olivia Johnson's story was a testament to resilience, strength, and unwavering moral courage. Her fight had proven that even in the darkest moments, one person could make a difference, and that justice, though delayed, could not be denied when courage met conviction. Olivia's journey from tragedy to triumph will stay with you forever. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel to witness more inspiring true stories that show courage, justice, and hope in action.